What's up, everybody, and welcome to my official ranking of the Breaking Bad television series. If you've been following along with this channel for the past week, I've reviewed every single season all week long leading up to the release of El Camino. I've dropped my spoiler-free review and by this time my spoiler-filled review of El Camino. So if you want my more in-depth thoughts, a lot more in-depth because some of those are like 40 minutes long, check out those reviews, please. I go over pretty much every detail I can think of to go over in each individual season, as well as El Camino. El Camino will not be a part of this ranking. I will say that now. I don't feel like it makes sense to place a 2-hour movie in with 5 13-episode seasons. Well, one 7-episode season. But nonetheless, this is going to be ranking the 5 seasons of Breaking Bad from worst to best, which I almost need to amend that from worst to best to talk about this because there's no worst anything with Breaking Bad in my opinion. There's great to greatest. You know what I mean? There's none of these seasons that I would even say is just good. It's brilliance from start to finish. I absolutely love this series. It's my favorite show of all time. It's one of the few perfect things out there, I think. So that I'm just one of those people. I think that this show is brilliant from start to finish. So know that going in. This might be biased towards that, but anyway, this is going to be my ranking of 5 seasons that I think are all equally brilliant in a lot of ways, just in my preferred order of preference of how I watched them, which ones impacted me the most, which ones were a little bit more enjoyable to watch. So with that being said, the least awesome season of Breaking Bad, number 5 for me, is season 1. Now, season 1 does have a little bit of an Achilles heel in the fact that it's the only season that is only, I think it's either 7 or 8 episodes, but it's a short season. Every other season past this has been 13 episodes, and then the final season was 16 episodes. It's basically 2 half seasons put together. So that is something to acknowledge when saying that this is number 5. But this is when the show didn't quite nail its tone yet. This was very much when it had a lot of dark comedy elements to it. It certainly slows down a lot in the story and focuses more on the history of Walter White, like his history with gray matter and his relationship at home and kind of where his mental state is at. It starts off crazy for the first couple episodes, kind of slows down a lot more in the rest of the season as they explore this guy's life as well as Jesse's life and his relationship with his parents, and then kicks off at the explosion at the end whenever they get involved with Tuco and Heisenberg is born. A lot of awesome things about this season. First of all, just the introduction of everything. The introduction of Breaking Bad, the introduction of Walter White, the introduction of Jesse, this whole world, this mental state that he's in, this plot, this concept, which is brilliant. And it's great. As soon as the series starts, it's great right off of the bat. So there's nothing negative really about Breaking Bad season 1. It's just that it's just not quite that epic Breaking Bad yet. Standout Moments is like the first episode whenever you get the first cook and the introduction of Crazy 8 and Walter White having to murder these 2 guys. The second episode where the tub falls through the floor, that was the moment that I was hooked on this show. I was like, oh my God, I have to watch every minute of this show now. The Crazy 8 death, where he actually lived through the first episode and Walter White has to choose to murder him with that bike lock, and the emotion in that scene. And then when Heisenberg is born, whenever he goes to confront Tuco about beating Jesse half to death and has that fulminated mercury that he thinks is meth and just blows up the entire little crib, I guess you can call it, of Tuco. That is just badass shit. So there's some awesome standout moments in season 1. Absolutely love it, but it is number 5 in my ranking. Number 4 is going to be season 2 of Breaking Bad. This is the first full-length season, and this is where the show definitely starts to get a lot more of its footing as far as the tone that it's going for and the approach that it's going for. Still holds on to a lot of the elements from season 1, where you have a little bit of that dark comedy edge. There's certainly a lot more downtime in season 2 where they explore relationships some more, explore the family state. There's a lot of tension between Walt and Skyler this season, which holds it back a little bit for me because it is so wishy-washy the entire season, where you understand where she's coming from and then she's being a bitch, and then you understand where she's coming from and then she's being a bitch, and she's a very hard character to nail down your thoughts on. Even though she's 100% right in her motivations, the fact that you love Walt so much and that you're so invested in his story makes you despise her to a certain degree, regardless how evil the things that Walt puts her through are throughout this entire series. So it's a weird character, but nonetheless, you have A lot of great moments between Walt and Jesse and their relationship, to where it kind of goes to shit in the first couple episodes and then rises to this great point to where you get 4 days out, one of my favorite episodes of the series, where they're stuck out in the desert and they cook almost over $1 million in meth, and they're like, you're high-fiving and like, yeah, bro! Like, that's one of those moments where you're like, God, I love these characters. And then it goes right back down into shit, where Jesse explores drug use a lot more and gets involved with Jane, played by the great Kristen Ritter, and she's a really interesting dynamic to add into his life, where she's an ex-addict and she kind of challenges his bullshit a little bit, and then his pain with everything going on and the loss of Combo pushes him into drug use a little bit more, which ends up pushing her into drug use, which pushes his drug use even further into heroin, and they go into this huge downward spiral where they end up blackmailing Walt, and it leads to her death in one of the most emotional scenes of the series, where Walt can save her, but he chooses not to. Brilliant acting by Bryan Cranston in that scene. You get the introduction of Gus, the introduction of Mike, the introduction of Los Pollos Hermanos, and Hank coming this much closer, and his whole downward thing where he goes off to Mexico to be a badass, and there's cartel and decapitations and explosions and shit, and he's got PTSD for the rest of the season, and so many great elements of season 2. Again, it's just pure brilliance from start to finish. It's just, as far as holding it back from being 3, 2, or 1, it's just still not quite nailing that epic Breaking Bad tone that they certainly get from season 2 onward. The tension between Skyler and Walt getting a little bit aggravating in spots, although you understand why it's placed in the story like that, and just a little bit more downtime in the middle of the season, where the further seasons that I'm going to be talking about feel like the tension is going the whole way through. So still a perfect season for the most part as far as I'm concerned, just not as perfect as the ones above it. Now the rest of these 3, I gotta be honest, are very hard to rank. Like, even including, I've said in my season 4 review that season 4 and 5 are often very hard in contention for me for which one is my favorite, but even looking back on season 3 is like right up there with season 4 and 5 with the things that it does. But season 3 is my number 3. Great stuff in this season. This is the first season when Breaking Bad feels like the Breaking Bad that it becomes, and this is where they nail that tone and that darkness and that direction that they kind of hold on to through to the end of the series, where still some dark comedy elements here and there, but it's a lot more serious, a lot more dark. The tension is full on, the pace is full on. It feels like there's not a single downtime moment in this entire season, or really for the rest of the series for all that matter. But season 3, the story of them getting fully into bed with Gus, where they're now cooking for this meth kingpin, and they're basically, they're just scientists. They're just down in this underground hidden lab cooking meth, but this guy's getting most of the profits, and that tests Walt's ego a little bit. It tests Jesse's even more. Jesse and Walt's relationship goes through ups and downs again, to where Jesse's out of recovery. Walt has this secret now that he let Jane die. He's kind of caring for him as a son, trying to get him back into life, but then Jesse immediately, in his stable mind, goes back into meth cooking and can cook damn near as good as Walt now, and that tests Walt's ego again, which puts them at odds. You have the whole thing with Hank, where Hank gets this close to catching Jesse, which eventually leads to him getting this close to catching Walt. This great sequence where they're locked in the RV and Hank is right outside the RV, and eventually leading to his whole downfall with Jesse, which puts him back into bed with Walt to try to keep him under his wing so he can stay out from underneath the view of Hank, ultimately leading to the downfall of the relationship with Gus. Just a lot of things leading to things, and just a lot of pieces placed in front of each other for this domino tower to fall in season 3, to where Gus wants Walt. Gus respects Walt. Gus wants to be in business with Walt, does not want anything to do with Jesse, but Walt's love for Jesse, as well as kind of burden with keeping Jesse around because of all the things that he knows and all the things that he can bring to his life in a negative way, leads Walt to having to have this split with Gus in my favorite episode of the series, pretty much. At least I'll sit down and maybe something is better, but I usually hold to Half Measures being my favorite episode, where you get this great speech from Mike, and there's this whole thing where Jesse finds out that the drug dealers that murdered Combo actually work for Gus, and there's this question if Gus ordered the hit, and the fact that they're using kids is a big issue. They come to this little handshake agreement, and then the kid ends up getting murdered, which again leads to more questions about, was the kid murdered because these drug dealers are idiots or because Gus ordered the hit? And so many like So many broken connections of trust from Walt to Jesse to Gus are now in existence, and Walt chooses Jesse. Walt chooses to save Jesse's life and put himself at risk with Gus, leading to a great 1-2 punch from half measure to full measure, where you get Walt, who is being led to his assassination in this underground lab, and he gets the word out to Jesse to where Jesse can run off and murder the only other scientist that they have, this chemist that can cook Walt's formula, and pulls one over on Mike and Gus and leaves you with this insane cliffhanger of Jesse holding the gun out to Gus that was unbearable for somebody that had to wait a year plus to get to season 4. So season 3, like I said, pure brilliance. Nothing about this season that I would change. The stakes just get a little bit higher in season 4 and 5, which lead to leave this sitting comfortably at number 3. So now we have our top 2. And this is one of those rankings where you ask me on Monday, it'll be one answer. You ask me on Tuesday, it'll be another answer. They're that close. Very different reasons why they're that close, but season 4 and 5 are 2 of, if not the 2, greatest seasons of television that I've ever seen. But as of this moment, my number 2, the runner-up for greatest season of Breaking Bad, is season 5, the final season of Breaking Bad, the extended season, which to me is always weird to consider it a full season because I watched it as 5A and then 5B, so they always almost feel like season 5 and then the final season, but nonetheless, they've chosen to have it as one season. They've marketed it that way. It's on Netflix that way, so might as well bite the bullet and just call it all season 5, just like I did when I reviewed it. Season 5 is where Walt is full on Scarface. This is where he is full on Kingpin. He feels like he is the king. He is the meth ruler of the Southwest. He's taken out Gus. He's got a little bit of tension going on with Mike, but Jesse's full on in his camp again due to his manipulations with Brock and Gus. And it feels like the world is out there for the taking now with Walt. And the fact that he's come over on top of Gus and how close to death that he was and reigned supreme in that whole Battle of Wills in season 4, you see his ego immediately switch on as soon as this season starts, to where he feels like he's untouchable. He feels like nothing can stop me now. Not Hank, not the DEA, not Skyler, no more cartels. The world is my oyster, bitch, and this is here for the taking. And that this is the first season where, as a viewer, you start to dislike Walt a little bit, and you start to see him as the villain of the show, which has been this transformation that he's gone from season 1 to season 5. And I love the dynamic in the first half between him and Mike and Jesse kind of having to be in partnership with each other. The tension that Mike and Walt have are very entertaining, and I love Jonathan Banks as Mike. The train episode, Dead Freight, that whole awesome train robbery is one of those badass, epic Breaking Bad moments. The fact that they bring back like the solutions to problems through science and chemistry that Walt, and then this season mostly Jesse, brings, where they need to get rid of a laptop, so they create a magnet to shoot it across the room. They need to get methylamine and not have them realize it's gone, so they have this little train robbery where they replace it with water in equal amounts at the same time while the train is stopped. All these little elements I thought were great in season 1 get called back into season 5. Then you get to the second half of season 5, where it's basically everything coming to a head from the entire series. The relationship between Hank and Walt coming to its ultimate confrontation, where Hank finds out that Walt is Heisenberg and all the tension that brings. Jesse finding out 90% of what Walt has done and lied about, involving poisoning Brock and all the things with the rice and cigarette, and putting them in contention with each other, to where Jesse now is working with Hank and all the confrontation that brings. Walt getting into bed with neo-Nazis, to where he's trying to use them to keep himself safe, but also get into bed with some very fucked up people that ultimately lead to his downfall, and certainly the downfall of Hank. Ozymandias, one of the greatest episodes of television ever, to where you have basically everything. It's for all intents and purposes the finale of the show, and then Granite State and Felina are much more of like a 2-episode epilogue for Walt. But you have Hank getting murdered. You have Walt's reaction to that, which again, brilliant acting by Bryan Cranston. You have the ultimate fallout between Skyler and Walter Jr. and Walt, to where she attacks him with a knife, tells him to get out, and now he's lost his family forever. All the emotion that brings involving his daughter Skyler, where he kidnaps his baby girl and then has to basically put on a charade on the phone where he condemns his family, and he's crying the whole time because he's saying it just to give Skyler an out. He doesn't really mean it, but he's saying it for the police's benefit, and then has to hand over his daughter to a fire station to basically abandon her and walk away from his family forever. Then Granite State and Felina, where you have him basically in a cabin alone, just waiting for death, and Robert Forster, and a great character, as like this witness protection program, this little black market where he's hiding him. And you see him basically confronting his morality, or mortality really, and morality, where he's in the situation where he's basically waiting to die. He's lost everything, he's alone, his life has gone to shit, and he's surrounded by everything that he's built his empire for, and it's all for nothing. Gives one last attempt to give it to his son, which ends in a really emotional phone call where his son basically condemns him and wishes he would die. And he comes this close to setting himself to, or getting himself in, to getting the police to take him in and just having it all be over with. But he sees that little thing on TV where the two guys, Gretchen and, or the two ex-partners of his, Gretchen and Elliot from Gray Matter, just give one last little dig at him, and it's just too much for his ego to take, leading into Felina, which is the greatest season finale that I've seen, or series finale rather, that I've ever seen for a show that I've watched all the way through the end, where everything feels like it's wrapped up in a nice little bow. Everything with him and Gray Matter, everything with him and Skylar and Walter Jr. and Holly, which is a very bittersweet moment where he gets to watch his son and can only watch him from a distance. Gives her the coordinates to Hank's corpse and Steve Gomez's corpse as a way to get herself out, and also give Marie some closure. And then ends up in this badass sequence where he uses this machine gun apparatus to take out all of the neo-Nazis. Jesse gets to snuff out Jesse Plemons' character Todd. Todd's another great element of this season, where he's this really creepy villain that you didn't realize was going to be such a standout character. And then the whole final kind of scenes between him and Jesse, to where he kind of goes there intending to murder Jesse along with everybody else, thinking that he's helping this neo-Nazi camp build this meth empire on his formula, and then finds out that he's a meth slave and his life has gone to hell, and he's basically a dog in a cage, and he uses his powers, whatever he can left, to save Jesse and to get Jesse out. Just a great way to end it on. The great final sequence whenever he's kind of saying goodbye to all of the meth equipment. You got Baby Blue playing, and then he lands in the same position as Crawl Space. Season 5 is brilliant. Season 5 is a perfect final season. As far as why it's number 2, it is a little bit jarring how far his ego goes and how much his attitude and his arrogance grows between the end of season 4 and the beginning of season 5. It makes sense story-wise, but as a viewer, it is hard when you go from a character that, even though he's still doing evil things, you still root for him, to a character that you suddenly kind of struggle to like immediately in the season start. And just the fact that season 5 is a little bit more difficult to watch. It's not an easy throw on, and just, it's not something that you can just enjoy to watch because of how heavy everything is and how devastating everything goes. So that is the small reasons why it ends up in number 2, and my number 1 is sitting supreme. Then you have my number 1, which I will not only call the greatest season of this show, but the greatest season of television that I have ever seen, and that is season 4 of Breaking Bad. Walt versus Gus. This season is pure ratcheting tension insanity from start to finish. From box cutter all the way to face off. It is just, you are on the edge of your seat, barely being able to stand, watching week to week to week, waiting to find out what happened. And all of you that can watch this show on Netflix, I almost envy you the fact that you don't have to have that anxiety for 6 days out of the week waiting for what's going to happen the next week. Season 4 is absolute perfection in every sense of the word. When you have this ultimate confrontation, this ultimate battle of wills between Walter White and Gus Fring, the whole plot about Gus manipulating Jesse into coming over into his camp and dividing this relationship between Walt and Jesse is pure brilliance. The whole backstory of Gus and Hermanos and Salud, the way that he gets back at the cartel. And again, they give you just enough to make you that much more interested in Gus without giving you the answers, which is something that this show has done brilliance with, his ambiguity. I love the fact that they actually make you almost root for Gus to a certain degree. Like, you're on Walt's side, you're on Jesse's side, but Gus is so awesome that you almost don't want to lose him, and you almost don't want him to lose because he's such a badass character. Walt going to some very dark places this season, especially with his family, and the scene whenever he has with Walter Jr. where he accidentally calls him Jesse, just small subtle elements there. The whole thing with Skylar kind of coming into bed with his blue meth empire and being his cooperation basically in the money laundering, the whole element of the Beneke Corporation and all that drama that gets added in behind the scenes. So much about this season. Jesse, Jesse probably has the greatest arc in this season, to where he starts off and he's so broken from having to murder Gale and kind of wanting to be surrounded by meth heads at all the time, not wanting any silent moments in his life because he just sits there in pain, to becoming almost like this badass henchman for Gus, at one point going on full intention to murder Walt, thinking that he is poisoned Brock, which he did. And then the last 2 episodes where you have Walt and Jesse finally coming together to try to take down Gus, and this ultimate plot where they figure out the relationship between Hector Salamanca and Gus and use that to their advantage. And god damn, this season is so great. So I mean, I could go on. I've already done enough splurging about this show this week, so if you want all my full-on details in any of these seasons, go watch my review. But season 4 of Breaking Bad is the greatest thing on TV that I have ever seen. So that's it, guys. What is your ranking of the Breaking Bad series? Let me know down below. It's a very hard series to rank because all these seasons are so brilliant that I almost would never argue with any ranking that I see. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. Rank them 1 to 5, please. Let me know your thoughts on El Camino. Please check out all of my reviews of these seasons, as well as my review of El Camino, for my full-on spoiler-filled thoughts and spoiler-free thoughts. If you haven't seen El Camino, I got 2 reviews for those. So check all that out, guys. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Please be sure to check down below in the video description for social media links like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel and help this channel grow while getting cool exclusive content for your eyes only, and my Teespring store, which is just below the video description. You can scroll down right now and see all of my merchandise designs designed by my buddy Woody Bowen. All of my merchandise availability like sweatshirts, t-shirts, tote bags, stickers, pillows. There's a ton of stuff on Teespring to check out. 31 on 31 designs are already down there. Autop Stream logo is down there. Please check that out. And if you guys want to check out some more of my reviews or rankings, such as all my Breaking Bad reviews, you can check those out by clicking right over here. Bitch.